Hello everyone, back tuning in to Gazworthy's latest Bank Holiday Monday historic video. We're going to be looking at the summers of 1954, 1955 and 1956 for this historic video. So we've got 3 years to get through. I'm going to try and do it at or under half an hour, so I may overrun a little bit, but it's going to be a long one. This got 3 years to get through 3 very unique summers, and it was unusual period of summers through the middle part of the 1950s. So I'll run you through the charts in a second and show you how those 3 summers evolved. Before I get on with that, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on all the pages. Have a browse through widgets and click through the links if there's any articles that you're interested in. Thanks very much for doing that. There's video ads on most of the pages. They open up the content, and when you watch them, they close back up again. It helps to pay for our website. Just to say about websites we're using for the historic video, it would not be possible to do this video or all of the other. I think we're number 30 now. It would not be possible to do this historic video or all of the other historic videos that we've done without 2 websites. We've got Trevor Harley's personal weather website, where he has all of the information. Most of the information you hear in this video will be taken from Trevor Harley's website, because obviously I wasn't born in the 1950s, so I've got no recollection of what happened then in terms of weather or anything else, actually. And also the charts are coming from the historic archive of weather charts at weathercentral.de. And their historic archive goes all the way back to January 1871. And I think it's really the combination of putting the charts with the information we get from Trevor Harley's website that makes all of this work. I'm just a presenter, if you like, on the least important factor in all of this. But once we put the charts together with the information from Trevor Harley, that is what brings these historic videos alive. And a big thank you to weathercentral.de and Trevor Harley for all of their help and endeavours in not just this historic video, but all of the historic videos that we've done. This will be kept at gazworthy.com indefinitely, so you can't watch it all in one go. Don't worry, it'll be around the website indefinitely, forever. Won't be getting rid of it at all. So you just find this, once it's removed from the home page by clicking the button at the top of the page that says historical, and then you'll go to a page that has the full 30 historic videos that we've done so far, going right way back to when I started in 2012, and I have to sound pretty poor on those earlier ones, so I recommend looking at the later ones. Ignore the early ones, perhaps, because I'm not very good on them, but they're all there for you. I haven't got rid of any of them except one. I did get rid of one historic video, and actually that was for the summer of 1954, so in a way I'm redoing 1954 with this update, summer of 54, but I'm adding more to it. But I'm very displeased with how that 1954 video came out. I did it back in 2012. I wasn't very good on it, and it just wasn't at the requirement that I set myself to leave that up for you to watch. So I did get rid of that one. That's the only one I've ever got rid of. All the other ones are there back to 2012. So check them out if you want to. But bear in mind, I'm not very good on those earlier historic videos. So, well, that's it. I better get on with the update. I've talked for long enough, so let's get on with today's historic video. I'm going to start with the summer of 1954, and then we'll go on to 1955, 1956 at the end. We'll also have some historic pictures, but I've managed to find on Google. There's not many of them, unfortunately, but there are a few pictures, and we'll also have a look at some reanalysis from my good friend James Ackles. So a lot to get through. Let's start off with May 1954. Now, May 1954 was a pretty unremarkable month. There was a wet start, but then actually it got hotter as we went on. So we start off here in May 1954 with low pressure right over the top of the country. So it was a cool, wet, unsettled start. High pressure is up over Greenland. That low pressure stuck around for much of the first week, but then it moved away, and as we go through to the 10th of May, we're building a ridge here across Scandinavia, and that's starting to bring much warmer air in from the east and the south as this area of low pressure is stalling in the Atlantic. Excuse me. So for a time around the middle part of May 1954, it did turn warmer and temperatures approached the mid-20s Celsius, but it didn't last all that long. By mid-month, the winds were going back into the north once again, and those cool northerly winds stayed with us into the second half of the month, with high pressure to the west and low pressure to the east. And then as we go through towards the end of the month, we find this area of low pressure coming in off the Atlantic, but stalling, and that starts to pump up some much hotter air. So as we move through in towards the 27th of May 1954, look at this, the winds are going into the south, and we're starting to pull up our first plume, in fact one of our only plumes of the summer of 1954. So we go towards the end of May 54, and we see temperatures going into the 80s Fahrenheit, 28 degrees here on the 27th and 28th of May. This was the hottest day, one of the hottest days of the summer. Whole summer actually occurred on the 28th of May 1954 with those southerly winds. However, by the time you go through to the end of the month, it's turned cooler. High pressure's relocated to the north of Scotland. Winds are going back into the north. There's some pretty violent thunderstorms with that one. So this is how we start June 1954. This is the 1st of June, so the summer of 1954 begins like this, with high pressure sitting to the north and bringing down this cool north or northeasterly flow. Temperatures in June 1954 weren't all that remarkable, so central temperature comes out at 13.4, which isn't that far from the average. And we have a bit of high pressure actually as we start the month. So this is the 4th of June, and high pressure is in there across the country, but it doesn't last all that long. The 5th shows a high pressure already starting to weaken as these areas of low pressure begin to move in off the Atlantic. And look at this, as we go through into the 6th of June, the low pressure is coming in there across the country, and it just turns more unsettled then. And this starts to set the scene for what's going to happen through the summer of 1954. Because if you didn't see that first historic video that I did, the first version, you may not know that the summer of 1954 was one of the worst summers of the 20th century. It's worst since 1912. Up to this point, there were very few summers after 1954 that were as bad. So we move through into the 12th of June, and you see low pressure is dominating here. It's in a very cool position as well, set across Scandinavia. The ridge is a long way away, the Azores High, which you normally look at to bring us our summer weather. That's pushed well away from us, and we're in those very cool northerly winds, and that continues into the middle part of June as well. Now the second half shows a little bit of a ridge down to the south, so the Azores High is trying to make a move towards us. It's ridging into the south, but really it's the Atlantic flow that's still dominating, and as we move through to the second half of the month, we just keep these areas of low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. There's a lot worse to come through this summer, but it's still, even now, and this is one of the better phases in the second half of June, it's not that great. The high pressure is generally to the southwest, and the low pressure is up to the north and northeast. And that low pressure, as go through towards the end of June 1954, just takes over really and starts to dig in from the north and west. So it turns increasingly unsettled to end the month. Winds are going into the north here. Very, very poor summer chart, as I'm sure you know. We end June 1954. Again, trying to build a little bit of a transient ridge up from the south, but still the low pressure is coming in off the Atlantic. The winds are cool from a north to northwesterly direction. We carry on through into July, and well, we tried to build a little bit of a ridge, but it doesn't come off, and as we go through into the 3rd of July, there we go, the low pressure is coming back again from the north and west. This was a very, very dismal summer month, July 1954. It has a Central England temperature of 13.4. Terrible month. There's very few summer months in July that go down into the 13 Celsius. So this is one of the coldest Julys on record, and I say really, really dismal as well. So we run through and we have further rain coming in off the Atlantic. Again, the ridge is trying to come in off the Atlantic, but it's a fair way away from us in the Azores, actually the centre of that ridge. Generally, it's these areas of low pressure that continue to drive in. Moving through to the 10th, tried to set up a little bit of a ridge across Scandinavia, but that doesn't come off. This low pressure is driving in off the Atlantic on the 10th of July, and we just stay under this trough as we go through up towards the middle part of the month with further areas of low pressure driving in. This is how we go into the second half of the month. Is 16th of July 1954. Again, it's all westerly. It's low pressure to the north and west, high pressure of the Azores high. It is there, but it's not able to get a foothold. It tries to throw up ridges occasionally, but really, again, it's these areas of low pressure that are driving in off the Atlantic. Look at this, go through to the 18th. Another area of low pressure is digging down, bringing heavy rain. The central pressure here is 995 to 990 millibars across the country. Really, really low pressure for the time of the year. Unusual to see pressure going as low, 990 millibars in July. Again, the Azores High tries to build a little bit of a ridge there as we go through into the 21st of July, but it's still all of these areas of low pressure driving in, bringing bouts of rain. And we go through to the end of July and we get a deterioration again. The high pressure is pulling a very, very long way out into the central part of the Atlantic, allowing these areas of low pressure to attack from the north and northwest. Look at that on the 27th of July. High summer, and you've got a 995 millibar area of low pressure. Actually, I think it's 985 millibar area of low pressure, centred almost over top of the country. Torrential rain, gale force winds driving in with that one. This is how we end July 1954, still in a very unsettled phase. We go through to August and it rounds off what is a shockingly terrible summer. August has central temperature of 14.6. So out of the 3 summer months, August 1954 is actually the warmest. That's not saying much. To have an August that's in the 14 Celsius is very, very dismal. Coming off the back of that July in the 13 Celsius, well, you can just imagine what a shocker of a summer this was. Very wet, very cool, very unsettled. It was the worst August up to this point, I think, since 1912, and there's been very few Augusts after this that have been as bad. Try to build a little bit of a ridge again to the south and west, and actually it looks a little bit thundery with this low pressure over northern parts of France, but that all comes to nothing, and it's just the low pressure again driving in off the Atlantic. It's over 7th of August 1954 sees low pressure centred right over the top of the country, bringing bouts of heavy rain to many places. We go through into the 10th. Low pressure is just there. The low pressure fest goes on and on and on. We go to the 15th of August 1954, and there's no real change here. The winds are in from the north. Now it's continuously westerly or northerly, westerly back to northerly, westerly, northerly throughout this summer. Very, very few southerly influences. And here we are on the 15th of August 1954 with low pressure to the east. Little bit of a ridge trying to build from the west, but it's bulb winds into the north. There's actually 80 millimetres of rain recorded on this day, the 15th of August 1954, at Bidston in Liverpool. I think that fell out of a thunderstorm. We continue into the second half of the month, and it remains very unsettled. Look at this, 18th of August. You've guessed it, another low pressure is driving through, bringing more bouts of very heavy rain. Excuse me. On the 21st of August 1954, a bit of a ridge is building to the north of Scotland, but pressure is very weak to the south and the east of the country. And look what happens. We go through to 22nd. We start to move this area of low pressure, quite unusually, move this area of low pressure up out of the continent and into eastern parts of the country. So this was very wet. There's 78 millimetres of rain in an hour at the Isle of Wight on this day, the 22nd of August. And can you believe that from the 16th to the 24th of August 1954, there was no sunshine recorded at all at Tynemouth. absolutely shockingly, dismally awful summer month, as bad as it gets, to be honest. So that low pressure develops in the North Sea, bringing a very, very wet spell from the 22nd into 23rd of August. You can just imagine what it was like. This is at the end of what has already been a dismal summer, and there we have a 995 millibar area of low pressure sat in the North Sea. Gale force northerly winds, driving rain, just absolutely dismal. And that continues into the 25th as well, so there's no let up in the summer as we come to the end. Eventually, by the final days of August, we start to try and build a little bit of a ridge from the Azores high down to the south. So it does turn a bit drier and warmer just for the very end of August, and even into the start of September, it is turning a little bit warmer. And actually on this day, 27 Celsius on the 1st of September was recorded. So you had to go back to May to find temperatures in the 80s Fahrenheit, and we got back into the 80s Fahrenheit in September, with the 3 summer months not able to do it. Although this looks like it could be pretty decent, what actually happens is that after a day or two of having that ridge and warmer temperatures, it all just breaks down, and actually September 1954 was a very, very unsettled and wet month, with low pressure systems just driving in continuously, keeping the pattern going that set up over summer. So although we had that hot start to September, with the opening day or two seeing temperatures 27, 28, 29, possibly even 30 degrees, 86 Fahrenheit, just in the opening couple of days, in the end it turns out to be really quite a cold month, with temperatures in Central England region reaching just 12.7, and again, very, very unsettled, wet, and quite a nasty month, to be honest. Early autumn, coming after that dismal summer, it wasn't great. So that's the summer of 1954. Now, what about the summer of 1955? Well, this one goes completely the other way. So we have a much hotter summer setting up here, although it has a really interesting May. So we start off in May 1955 with low pressure out to the west. What's happened through this period? I have to explain a little bit. As we go through to the 4th, we have this gale force westerly wind. What's happened through this spring of 1955 is that it's been very, very dry. There's hardly any rainfall recorded at all across parts of the east of the country during April 1955. Although this is reverted to an unsettled pattern in May, the ground is very, very dry in the east. So May the 4th, 1955, has what is almost described by Trevor Harley and Philip Eden as a sandstorm, can you believe? But it's called the Fen Blows, and there's a 48-hour gale with winds reaching 40 miles an hour and gusting up to 65 miles an hour, blowing over very dry soil and reducing visibility to 300 metres. This is in the eastern part of the country, around the Fens. We see very, very unusual for this country, almost sandstorm type conditions at the start of May 1955. Quite bizarre. What happens then is that we turn wetter, so that washes out all of that sand. We go into a wet and eventually a very cold phase for May 1955. So look what's happening on the 13th. We're building a ridge here across Greenland and sending these areas of low pressure south and east across the country, quite interestingly. And let's go through to the 14th and the 15th. Look at that. The winds are going into the north. We bring an unusually cold air mass down across the country, and we start to see night frost developing. We also start to get snow showers. So the cold air moves south on the 10th, bringing snow showers to many parts of the country on the 14th. And through this middle part of the month, 15th, 16th, we're getting nighttime minimum temperatures going down to -4 -5, -6, -4 is recorded in Lincoln, -6 in Dalwhinnie. And things get even more extreme as we go through into the 16th on into 17th. Look at this area of low pressure starting to move in off the Atlantic on the 16th. That's pushing up to the south coast on the 17th. On the northern side of this low pressure, there's very cold air. So can you believe this day, the 17th of May, 1955, has rain turning to snow across central parts of the country. So the maximum in the Midlands was only 5 Celsius on this day. That's around 10, 10, 11 degrees colder than average. Quite remarkable. And there is snow falling here through parts of central southern England. Birmingham was worst affected and had the worst May snowstorm there for 60 years. But even down into London, this area of low pressure from the 17th into the 18th is bringing snow down into the south and the southeast. That low pressure moves away to the east and turns the winds into the north. Look at that, really cold northerly coming through, giving more very unusually and damagingly hard overnight frost. The 22nd of May starts to see a reprieve. This area of high pressure begins to ridge up from the southwest, killing off that northerly flow and starting to lift the temperatures up. And the high pressure then takes us into a much warmer phase for the second half of the month, with high pressure dominating through to the end. Very nice ridge there, 1,030 millibars, lifting temperatures back towards where you would expect them to be going. So the frost ended on the 22nd and it turned much drier and much warmer. This is how we start the summer of 1955. I digress with that a little bit, but it is a very interesting spell that occurred there in May 1955. But this is how we start the summer of 55, with this ridge over Scandinavia. The low pressure is out to the west of the country. And that low pressure starts to dig in, actually, through June 1955. By the way, I should just say May 55 has a central temperature of 9.7, so it's a pretty cold month. June 55 has a central temperature of 13.8, so nothing particularly remarkable about the start of summer 1955. Generally quite a cool and quite an unsettled month, with low pressure systems continuing to dominate. Bit of a ridge builds there into the second half of the month, maybe just setting the scene for what could be ahead later in the summer. But that ridge doesn't last all that long, and actually the westerlies come back, turns unsettled again as we go through into the end of June 1955. And those unsettled conditions take us through into July, which actually is starting off looking not all that special. On the 4th of July 55, for example, low pressures over the top of the country, bringing showers or longer spells of rain. However, very quickly, this is going to change. July 1955 has a central temperature much better of 17.7. When you think how cold the July preceding this in 54 was, it's down in the 13s. This one has a central temperature up in the 17s. So obviously a very dramatic change is going to take place. And that begins really through the first week. So this is the 6th of July 1955, building this ridge up from the southwest, throwing the ridge into the UK, starting to set up a much hotter summer pattern, and that continues into the 7th, on into the 8th. Finally, we have an area of high pressure sat over top of the country, lifting the temperatures up. We're going up into the 80s Fahrenheit, with this probably approaching 30 degrees, maybe even 32 in one or two places, so that's getting close to 90 Fahrenheit. Now we move through into the 12th, and that pressure begins to weaken a little bit, so still very warm, if not hot, but we're starting to generate some thunderstorms. In towards the middle part of the month, this is the 15th, again another ridge being thrown up from these Azores. You see the difference here from the poor summer in 1954 to this one. The ridge being thrown up across the country from the Azores, that's the deciding factor. It pushes the jet stream northwards, or maybe the jet stream is just centred northwards, and that allows the ridge to build up from the southwest. It's like a chicken or egg scenario. Is it the Azores High moving the jet stream north, or is it the jet stream going north and allowing the Azores High to build in? Whatever, this is a much more hotter and sunnier and drier summer. Classic pattern here as we go through into 16th of July 1955 with that ridge again over the top of the country. And then things get a little bit interesting to go through to the 17th and into the 18th. High pressure still more or less dominating, but notice this thundery area of low pressure developing down to the south. This brings the British record for daily rainfall. According to Trevor Harley, there's heavy thunderstorms breaking out here down across the south around Dorset. We have heavy and violent thunderstorms moving up 2:30 in the afternoon on the 18th, and again 9 p.m. at night. It gives 178 millimetres of rain. Can you believe? Incredible rainfall to Weymouth. There's severe flooding in Weymouth, in Maidstone. There's very severe lightning as well with this. We start to see people unfortunately being struck by that lightning. There were fatalities through this middle part of July 1955, but can you imagine 178 millimetres of rain falling from this area of low pressure? Although actually it's a very dry month and high pressure builds back as we go through into the 21st. It's not a wet month at all. It's just those localised areas that happen to get those violent thunderstorms. This is a really classic summer pattern. Look at that. High pressure is centred over Scandinavia. The winds, the hot winds coming in off the continent, coming in from the east. If you like hot weather, that's about as good, I should say. Not as bad, it's about as good as it gets. And we end July 1955 again with that ridge over the top of the country. But some of those thunderstorms through July 55 were really very severe. As I say, unfortunately, there were some fatalities during this month. August 1955 has a central temperature of 18.1, so it's one of the classic hot summer months of the 20th century. Again, lots and lots of high pressure dominating. So we have high pressure ridging through the country, bringing temperatures of 27, 28, 29, 30 degrees quite widely across the country on the first day of August. The ridge continues into the first week, but by the 6th we are bringing some slightly cooler air down from the north, so a brief cool down occurs there. However, the ridge is building back in as we go through into the 10th, again bringing lots of dry weather. A bit of a thundery low threatening the southeast on the 13th, but essentially the high pressure still dominating. Low pressure trying to come in off the Atlantic on the 15th. Doesn't really come to anything. It's this ridge that's dominating to the east, fending off these areas of low pressure. And that ridge just takes over as we move through into the latter stages of August 55. The low pressure gets shunted off up towards Greenland and Iceland, allowing this ridge of high pressure to dominate. And that high pressure just takes over then as we move through into the end of the month, drawing up hot air from the south and the southeast. 32 Celsius being recorded around this period, 90 Fahrenheit from around the 21st through to the 25th of August. Look at that. Beautiful area of high pressure again is in there across the UK and dominating many northern parts of Europe as well. A classic hot, dry summer month. Pressure beginning to weaken just a little bit as we go through into the end of August 1955, but still essentially that ridge is dominating as we go through into the start of September, which has a central temperature of 14.2, so it was fairly warm. But not a classic September. The hottest day occurs around here, 6th, 7th, when we have temperatures going up to 80 Fahrenheit again, 27 Celsius, under this ridge of high pressure. But actually the ridge breaks down as we move through into the second week. And as I say, it is a warmish September, but not a classic. But that is one of the best summers that occurred through the 1950s and the 1960s that we saw there in 1955. 1955. And then let's go through to 1956. So this is the summer of 1956. We had a really dreadful summer. We've had a great summer. What does 56 have in store? We're going to revert back to being pretty poor again. So June 1956 has a central temperature of 13.1. So again, nothing remarkable about these Junes. They're all sort of close to average. It's really the Julys and the Augusts in these 3 summers that are quite striking. So on the 4th of June 1956, we bring these areas of low pressure in from the north and west, and generally very unsettled start to the month. However, a bit of a ridge builds here as we go through into the 10th of June. Azores is trying to send a ridge up towards Scandinavia, but it doesn't really come to much. This area of low pressure develops to the south and the southeast, brings some quite heavy rain here on the 11th. Actually, Trevor Harley describes it as a notable thunderstorm in the Bradford area with an exceptional downpour, 155 millimetres of rain occurring in 2 hours at Hardendon, with 156 millimetres in total, and this does lead to flooding. This area of low pressure is trying to drag in warm air from the east. This ridge across Scandinavia has a lot of hot air associated with it, but it's running into the hot air with this low pressure is running in across the cool North Sea, and that's what's generating those violent thunderstorms. That low pressure gets out of the way as we move through into the 13th, and then the weather starts to drive in off the Atlantic once again. And we have a sort of westerly month, to be honest. The Azores High is down to the southwest. It's trying to throw up these ridges, but it's all coming from the Atlantic as we go through to the 23rd. A ridge is trying to build in. This looks like it could be quite good, but doesn't really come off, and it pulls back again, actually. So even with the ridge trying to build in there around the 23rd, 24th of June, actually it's all still Atlantic based, so the air's relatively cool, and the high pressure then pulls back in towards the Atlantic, starts to allow these northerly winds to come down for the end of the month. And this is how we end June 1956, with low pressure dominating and bringing the first batch of really unseasonably wet and cool conditions. Then we go through to July 1956, which is a pretty dismal summer. It's part of one of the worst post-war summers that we have recorded up to that point. So the 1st of July, showing a deep area of low pressure moving in off the Atlantic, and unseasonably low pressure again. And that drives more areas of low pressure through as we go through into the 4th. Tried to build a little bit of a ridge here on the 7th. Again, doesn't really come to much, but it is enough to draw up somewhat warmer air to the south. But it all very quickly breaks down into thunderstorms. There's more violent thunderstorms breaking out on the 8th and into the 9th as this area of low pressure very quickly cuts off any ideas of a warmer spell of weather. We get 56 millimetres of rain at Kew in those violent thunderstorms, 79 millimetres of rain in a storm at Epsom. Also, really large hail being recorded. We get into the 10th of July 1956, and the high pressure is being squeezed up towards the north, so hints of northern blocking being set up here. Never a good sign, whatever the season. That's particularly true in summer, with low pressure down to the south bringing more heavy rain to southern parts of the country. And we just end on a really wet, unsettled note as we go through into the end of July 1956. It's cool, it's unsettled, it's very westerly. Again, a little bit of a ridge trying to topple in on the 25th, but again, that doesn't come to much. Any excuse me, again, any ideas of building that ridge in excuse me, again, any ideas of building that ridge in from the southwest very quickly fades away as this area of low pressure comes back in from the north, bringing a lot of really wet and unsettled conditions. In fact, if we just go back a second to the 25th, and I'm going to just change the dates here. I'm going to go through to the 29th. This area of low pressure does bring a violent gale from the 29th to the 30th of July 1956. Look at that, a very violent storm occurs, and that unfortunately brings fatalities to the Channel boat race that's taking place down on the south coast. There were fatalities with this spell of unseasonably wet and windy weather. The highest gust is 93 miles per hour at Lizard, and 69 miles an hour is recorded in London. Many trees blow down during this storm as well. That's quite a remarkable storm for July. Has a central pressure of 990 millibars, and to get such strong winds in July is really quite remarkable, and I think fair to say fairly unprecedented. There aren't many Julys that have that happening. So I think I'm right in saying that there wouldn't have been many Julys that would have had such a severe storm as we had this year in 1956, and as I say, unfortunately fatalities did occur. Central temperature of July 1956 was 15.8, so not too bad. It's the warmest month of the summer, not as cold as that July in 1954. However, worse was to come, because as we go through into August, we have a central temperature of 13.5, one of the coldest and wettest August of 20th century. Only 1912 was colder and wetter than this month. We start as we mean to go on, with low pressure driving in off the Atlantic, and it's just a low pressure fest through most of the month. 4th of August again, winds are in from the north, deep trough of low pressure, bringing heavy rain to much of the country. Dismal bank holiday, which occurs at the start of August in this period. Later on, the August bank holiday gets moved to the end of the month, but back in 1950s, the bank holiday weekend was August bank holiday weekend was at the start of August. It was a very, very dismal affair indeed. We're trying to bring in a little bit of hotter air and a plume here on the 10th, but, go through to the 11th, and that's very quickly cut off. Slow pressures coming in off the Atlantic, bringing yet more bouts of flooding rains across the country, and that takes into the 12th, with low pressure dominating. And it's just a cold, wet, miserable month. This is the 17th of August, with low pressure right over top of the country. That continues into the 19th. We go through 21st, again it's low pressure all the way. 24th, another area of low pressure, bringing yet more heavy bouts of rain, more gale force winds across many parts of the country. We get through towards the end of the month, the flooding rains continue. This is a really autumnal looking chart on the 25th of August 1956. Tremendous amounts of hail occurring around this month as well. So there's flooding at Tunbridge Wells. There's hailstones going to 4 inches deep. I think that's in Tunbridge Wells as well. So incredible amounts of thunder, heavy rain, gale force winds, cold temperatures. It really is the worst of the worst when it comes to summer months. 75 millimetres of rain at Somerset on the 25th, and also in the Borders on the 27th. We go through towards the end of the month. This takes us up towards the end of August 1956, and we get a frost, can you believe, towards the end of the month, especially in the northern part of the country. Throughout this month, 239 millimetres of rain falls at Blackpool. Despite the cold temperatures, there's 11 thunder days at something called Tangmere in Sussex. So just the instability of the air masses really proving that you don't necessarily need very high temperatures to generate thunder. We end August and this Really dismal summer, again with high pressure centred to the west, and the winds are coming in from the north. And then we go through to September 1956, so we get the hottest month of the year. So this doesn't happen all that often. To be honest, what happens in this month is that we get a central temperature of 14.3, the only time in the 20th century that September has been warmer than August, although we did do it again in 1999. Still quite an unsettling, changeable month, but as we went into the end of the month, this is 23rd, we drew up this very warm southerly flow, which lifted temperatures up to 26 degrees. I think that's the highest temperature that occurred throughout the year in 1956. The perverse nature of the British weather is that when we get these very cold, wet and dismal summers, we very often get the highest temperatures either in the spring, in May, or in September, and occasionally it can even happen in October. So that's it. That's how those 3 summers panned out, from the worst to the best and back to the worst again. A very unusual succession of summers. Let's just show you some reanalysis of these summer months. So this is July 1954. This is from our good friend James Ackrill. This just sums it up, really. The ridge out to the west, really deep trough over and to the east of the UK. It means that the winds are in from the north. It's a cold, wet, very unusual summer pattern. This is August 1954. This time it's all these troughs of low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. Look at that. And we've got northern blocking as well. Northern blocking is always a bad sign, and that's particularly true for summer. July 1955, though, the reanalysis looks like this, with this big ridge in across the west of Europe and across the UK as well. The low pressure is unusually through the Med and also around Greenland. So that's why we have a much better summer in 1955. We have a ridge centred over the country. August 1955 also showing a lot of ridging around the UK. Again, and usually low pressure is through the Mediterranean, so probably a pretty dismal summer there. And again, it's locked in up across Greenland and Iceland, while we are under that area of above average pressure. And then July, I should say, 1956, looks like this. Again, northern blocking, always a bad sign in the summer. So I'm going to have to change the colour here of the highlighter. It means that troughs of low pressure are on a southerly track with the jet stream here on a very southerly track as well. That's why it's a cool and changeable month. And then August 1956, one of the worst August of the 20th century, shows a reanalysis like this. There's Greenland blocking. There's a trough centred over the top of the UK. The winds are coming from a long way north. Actually, the fetch with the winds in this month is probably polar in origin, can you believe? So that's why it was such a cold, wet and really dismal month. Big thanks to James for sending those reanalysis charts through. That's about it. I'm going to leave you with some pictures from these summers. I haven't been able to find too many pictures, but there are a few that I'm going to share with you before I go. So this is Sheffield in 1954, and this obviously is a flooded road with kids stuck on their doorsteps watching the flooding. Wonder what they're thinking about it. I love seeing these old pictures and seeing these faces peering back at me and wondering what those people in those pictures are experiencing. I'm sure that was a very unusual sight to see that presumably it's a river flowing through the road outside their front door. This is a milkman trying to deliver the milk in 1954. Not sure where that is, but well, it's still there. It's still delivering the milk. Just going to show you how stoical they were in those days. This is the heat wave of 1955. These are people cooling off, having a paddle in the sea. Again, not sure where this is, but it looks like they are enjoying it anyway, cooling off in the heat of August 1955. Here's some kids, again, close to water, cooling off, having a little paddle in the August of 1955. I think it's in Bolton, that particular picture. And then finally, 1956, this is flooding in Leicestershire. Somebody driving a tractor through the flood. I wonder whether the tractor kept going or whether it got stuck as it tried to get through that flood. And then this is in the Wirral, again, flooding in 1956. As I say, not a huge number of pictures to go at, but just a bit of a snapshot there of what the conditions were like through those very unusual and contrasting summers of 1954, 1955 and 1956. Now, what I haven't said about this is that while we gave this unusual sequence of summers, the winters were also very, very interesting. 54, 55 and 55, 56, also 53, 54. They were all cold winters, and you'll find out more about that on Bank Holiday Monday at the end of the month. I think it'll be the 30th of May. The Bank Holiday update will be looking at the winters of the mid-1950s. So we'll do 53, 54, 54, 55, 55, 56, and you'll see some very cold charts with those. So I hope you enjoyed our look at the summers of the mid-1950s. As I say, the next historic video at the end of May, Bank Holiday Monday, we'll be looking at the winters of the mid-1950s. How long have I gone on for? Let's just have a look. 45 minutes. I think this is the longest one I've ever done. I hope you've stuck with it. And sorry for going on so long. It was always going to be a very long one, trying to cram 3 years into one video. But I hope you found it interesting and informative on this Bank Holiday Monday. Thanks so much for tuning in on your Bank Holiday Monday. And all that is left to say is enjoy the rest of your day. Things will be back to normal in terms of the updates here at Gaz Webbins tomorrow. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching.